Hello, everybody. This is Derek with Reef Automation. Today, I am going to go over the Reef Bot, and I'm going to go over how I feel about it, its pros and cons, and I'm also going to go over the programming of the Reef Bot and how it operates and some of the maintenance that needs to be done with it. Um, to first go over a few things, I've had my Reef Bot since inception. I bought it roughly a month after it was released. I've probably had it at least a year now. So I've been through all of the troubles with it and all the positives with it. I've also experienced just about everything you can experience with it. Um, and I just wanted to do a short video on my experience and also some of the programming aspects of the ReefBot before you make a purchase. So let's get started with some of the things about the ReefBot and how it works, what it looks like, so forth. So it's made by a company called Reef Kinetics. Kinetics is based out of Lebanon. So if you're like me and you live here in the United States, the trouble with getting support from them is they typically will respond to your support during hours that are not conducive. And again, that's not a fault of them, but they are located in Lebanon. So just be aware that when you need support, it might be difficult to get them unless you're awake during, you know, specific hours that they do support. So how it works is it's got some vials in here, um, and you put different amounts of reagent for different tests. So the standard Reef Bot comes with 8 different vials that you could use. There is a small plunger and a needle. On the right side of the unit is where it does the testing, and then there is a little RO chamber where it basically cleans the syringe prior to testing. One thing to note about the Reef Bot is that the syringe itself and the needle need to be replaced. Roughly, they say every 60 tests, but I have found that it can last for more than 60 tests without any problems. One thing also that you need to know is that if you do use all 8 vials, that they are nice and straight. Otherwise, what will happen is the needle will bend as it's moving across the vials. And that has happened to me a few times. As long as you keep the vials straight, that won't be an issue. So one thing to keep note of that. I recommend if you do get a Reef Bot that you buy enough syringes to last you for a while and enough needles to last you for quite a while. Um, the price tag is quite hefty at $900 here in the US. Um, you can get it from a couple places. Saltwateraquarium.com sells them. You can also, of course, buy it directly from them. They do have a shop here and they do sell all the parts. Again, anything you buy directly from them is coming from Lebanon, so it will take quite a while to get here. I think when I ordered mine, it took 3 weeks before I received it. Um, Here's all the tests that we'll do, and they do add tests here and there. They add the iodine, for instance, is a new test that they just added. So they do add tests quite a bit. They do have an app, and you can also do it on the computer, which is what I'm going to show you today. Um, let's see. Another couple things to be aware of when you buy the ReefBot is you need to have an RO container or RO water that it needs to receive. And that can be from a reservoir, which is how I use it. It could be from a small container sitting next to it. I will tell you from my experience that RO water goes quickly. After probably a week or two of tests, you're probably about half the water you had after a few tests. So just be aware. If you go to their support here, which I believe they moved it. Let's see. I apologize. If you go to the Reef Bot here and you go to their support, which they changed it on us. They have a support portal, and this is where you can pretty much get a number of things on installation, how to use it, how to get started, when to replace the needles. But one of the most important things that you need to look at is the duration and test for each parameter sheet. This is very important if you are going to be getting a Reef Bot. So this will tell you how long it takes to do the specific test. It'll tell you how many bottles that you need to use or vials you need to use and how many tests you need to buy. So for instance, when I bought my iodine test, I needed to get 2 test kits for my Reef Bot to work. Okay, it says right here you need 2 test kits. Okay, now probably one of the cons that I can't stand roughly about the Reef Bot is that it will not do a test if the vial is less than 50%. Now what I mean by that is you fill up these little vials, which I showed you a little earlier, and once they've hit 50%, the unit will no longer do the test. So you have to buy enough reagent to fill this completely, and it will only use 50% of the liquid, which I don't understand. They say that they're going to be making some larger vials to make it so it lasts a little longer, but unfortunately that is one of my largest gripes about the Reef Bot, is that it only does up to 50% of the vial's liquid. I don't understand why there's a large vial and it only uses 50% of it. So that's one thing to note whenever you get a Reef Bot, is that you're going to need multiple tests. One of the other things to notice is that it takes between 40 minutes on some tests and an hour and a half for other tests to perform the test. So if you want a quick result, you're going to have to wait an hour and a half for some of them. I find that a HANA checker that takes 5 minutes is a lot quicker and more reliable than the Reef Bot. So another thing about the Reef Bot is it's only as good as the test. And what I mean by that is these are all hobby grade test kits. And what that means is that when it gives you the result, it's going to give you the same result as this test would. So a lot of people get confused by that. And unfortunately, that is one of the other things about the Reef Bot that is a little bit misleading, is that it's accurate, but it's only accurate to that of the accuracy of the test. So if you have a test kit that's old, let's say, it's not going to be as accurate, and therefore the Reef Bot's not going to be accurate. The Reef Bot is only as accurate as its test that it's doing. So API phosphate, if it's not an accurate test normally for you, it's not going to be a normally reliable and accurate test through the bot. You will notice also the number of tests before it can be refilled. Some of these, like the ELOS KH, only will do 9 tests of alkalinity before you have to replace it. Another one, API calcium, some of these are 11. So what that means is it'll only do 11 tests with a whole entire test kit that generally will do 50 tests, which doesn't seem right to me. But again, that has to do with the 50% liquid that goes into the vials. So since the 50% liquid goes into the vials, it'll only do half the tests of a normal test kit. So you have to end up buying a lot of test kits. Another thing to note is that most of these test kits are difficult to find. They're difficult to get refills, they're difficult to get. So I recommend, if you're going to use a Reef Bot, that you buy at least 4 test kits of any one of these. Some of them require, for instance, the phosphate requires 5 test kits for the phosphate from Giesmann. So keep that in mind as you're looking at the Reef Bot. So let's go through. I've mentioned some of the things that have bothered me about it, but let me mention some of the things that I like about the Reef Bot. So what's nice about the Reef Bot is it is in fact automated. So once you do your scheduling and once you get it all working, it will automatically test your water whenever you want. And if you want to test at 3 in the morning and wake up to a test result, that's probably going to be your best bet. So with the Reef Bot, you can test your system when you're sleeping. So I find that to be the best way to use it. If you're going to be doing it during the day, which is also fine, just note you're going to have to wait an hour before the test is done. Um, so I find that to be very convenient in testing certain parameters that are important to me. Now, in my particular case, I have a Trident that tests my alkalinity, my calcium, and my magnesium all day long. So I have no use for the Reef Bot to test alkalinity. However, again, if I want to know my alkalinity, a lot of these tests require a lot of reagent to do alkalinity, let's say 2 or 3 times a day. Some people don't need to do it that often, but again, you're going to need a lot of reagent. Another great thing about the Reef Bot is instead of the Trident, which does test every hour, you can have this test whenever you want, any day of the week, twice a week, 3 times a week, however you want, and it will test it, which is really quite nice. Um, so just note that when it works really well, and it really doesn't have a lot of um, issues in terms of automatic testing. One thing, like I mentioned, is it's accurate based on the tests. So just remember, if you get a subpar test kit, it's going to not be accurate, and that's the unfortunate truth of the Reef Bot. All right, so a couple more things about the Reef Bot. The Reef Bot works either Wi-Fi or hardwired. I recommend that you hardwire the Reef Bot to your network. Um, one thing about the Reef Bot is it has to connect to a cloud to work. So one of the things that a lot of people have said about the Reef Bot is it doesn't test, or it misses a test, or it skips a test. The reason that happens is because the server that the ReefBot needs to connect to is either down, or there's something going on with their server, they do server maintenance. And again, since it's in Lebanon, they're doing it in the middle of the night for them, but for us, it's during the daytime. So that is one thing that I have mentioned to them on multiple occasions, that they need to have some type of local way of doing this instead of it having to connect to a server. Now, when I say it has to connect to a server, I mean it will not test. You cannot do any maintenance. You cannot do any refills of the vials. You can't connect to the app. You can't do anything if the servers are down. So just be aware that it always needs to be connected. That's why I recommend the hardwire connection. Um, let's go through some of the programming of the ReefBot. The app is quite simple to use. This again is on my computer. It's very similar. It's actually identical to that of the app. And when ReefBot first came out, this app that I'm about to show you was very slow. I'd click on a button and it would take between 20 and 30 seconds to connect. And as you can see, it's still not very quick. Unfortunately, it's still quite slow to connect. Now, I don't know if that's because I'm located here in the United States or because there's something going on with their server, but that seems to be something that I notice quite a bit on my ReefBot. Now, I'm using my ReefBot to test phosphate, nitrate, nitrite, and iodine. And what's nice is you can go in here and you can see your results. You can see when you had the results, what time you had the results, and it shows you the color at which they calculated at that time, which is really nice. It also gives you a graph, which is quite useful, but I don't really use it. But you can click on any one of these and you can click on test now and it will just do a test manually whenever you want. I did do ammonia at some point and I'm no longer doing the ammonia. But I find that this does really well with phosphate. It uses the Red Sea phosphate test, which is very accurate. I find the nitrate test to be somewhat accurate. I find the iodine to be very accurate. Again, that's based on the test. So you can schedule a test right here if you click on schedule, and then you can put in what you want it to be. So let's say in this case, let's just say ammonia test. You then select which bot, because you could have multiple bots. You would test the parameter phosphate. If you have multiple phosphate brands, you would put it in here. This is when you put the date in when you want to start. You can have it again anytime you want. You can have it hourly, monthly, yearly, all kinds. You could tell when you want it to end the testing, if you want it to stop testing after a certain period of time. You can also turn off the schedule or turn on the schedule. So the scheduling aspect of the ReefBot is fantastic. I really like the fact that you can test it whenever you want. Um, One thing I did want to mention is when you place the vials, as we discussed in this, you have to put them in a specific order generally. But if you don't want to put them in a specific order, you could actually go to your ReefBot device and go to maintenance, and you can actually put where you want these to be. Okay, so right now, this is my 3 tests for my tropic marin. Here's the 2 phosphate, and here's the 2 vials for my iodine. And I'll go through that a little bit more in detail. But this is where your devices are. This lists your specific devices, and this lists your tanks that it's connected to. So if you go to tests, which is the next tab, this will tell you if there's a test running or if there's a test not running. This will tell you what is scheduled, and these are my schedules, and you can alter them to see however you want them to be. And then this is the history. If it was a successful test, if there was a failure, if it ran into any problems. So one thing I've noticed over the last couple months is sometimes it skips tests. And that's been a real big problem for me, as I'll wake up in the morning and it'll be skipped. So again, that's been an issue for me. If you manually test, usually that's not an issue. If it's not connected to the cloud, that becomes an issue. I have never had this work. This is the safe margins and alarms. It's supposed to alarm you if these are outside of the range at which they show, but I never get an alert for these, so I don't believe they work. Under devices, this shows you how many devices you have, and you can assign a specific reef bot to a specific tank. This is where you put your information about the tank. This is a notification to tell you what your levels have been. If we click on the Reef Bot itself, it tells you the levels. Again, once this hits 50%, the test will no longer commence, and therefore you have to refill. And that's where it shows you how much you have left. This again shows your activity. This is where you can adjust which tests you want to add and delete, and which vials or tube they're going to be in. And you can put them wherever you'd like, and you can switch this at any time you want. This is where you reset when it's low. So this will always reset it to 20 milliliters, which is, again, when it's able to do a test, it's going to be more than 50%. This is where you put your waste, if you have a waste container, and you can set the waste container amount, and this is where you would set to empty the waste container. This tells you how many uses of the syringe is left. This is where you would go if you were going to replace them. Since my RODI comes out of my reservoir, it's an infinite amount, so this is where you'd set your RODI to tell you when your RODI is low. This is where you would do your calibration when you first get it. So something about the calibration to mention is when you first buy the Reef Bot, I recommend you do a calibration. I recommend you do it about 3 times in a row. The calibration takes between 30 minutes and 45 minutes to complete. I recommend that you do the test chamber calibration 3 times and the RO chamber 3 times. That seems to really benefit it working properly. Furthermore, if you were to move the Reef Bot, I recommend you doing a calibration at that time. The settings aren't really important. This is where you can name it. So this is basically how you use the Reef Bot. It's quite easy to use. The software, when it works, is quite intuitive and very simple to use. So I have been relatively satisfied with the software. This is exactly how you would use it on a normal basis. All right, so let's go through some of the other things about the Reef Bot. We're going to go through, again, the pros and some cons. The pros are the Reef Bot itself is great in what it does for you on a daily basis. It tests your water for you. You don't have to worry about it. I think it's a great piece of equipment. Um, when it tests all the parameters that are important, in a general sense. I think as a device, it's a great piece of equipment. You get really good um, results as long as, like I said, the test kit is appropriate and is a good test kit. Um, Other than that, that's really the only thing I can say positive about it. The negative or the cons that I would give it are the following. It takes a long time to do a test. Now, some people will say, well, just do them in the middle of the night. That's what I do. But if you need to get a parameter, it takes an hour or so to do the test. If you need to get your alkalinity real quick, a HANA checker will take you less than a minute. This will take 45 minutes to do an alkalinity test, which I find to be astonishing. The second thing is it's large. It's very big. It's roughly a foot by a foot by a foot. I mean, it's gigantic. So it's hard to find a place for it. Aesthetically, it doesn't look really nice. It's luckily it's black. It'll go with most furniture. It looks like a subwoofer, I guess, but it's very large. The third thing which I mentioned is the vials, and they have mentioned that they were going to fix this, but at this point it only does 50% of the liquid in the vials, which I don't find to be a great selling point. If you're going to have a device that uses its reagent, it should use all of the reagent. If you have to buy a bunch of test kits, it should use 100% of the reagent, not 50% of the reagent. Um, so that's another thing that I dislike about it. Another thing that I mentioned earlier is it consistently goes offline. When it goes offline and it's disconnected to the cloud, this little guy right here will go from green to red. Won't do a test. You can't calibrate it. You can't maintenance it. You can't do anything. It's completely a paperweight while it's offline. In 90% of the cases, it's because of their server. As a network engineer and as a programmer myself, it's not based off of the network in my house. It's always their server being down. Um, it skips tests. It's skipped tests on me multiple times. Sometimes I get notifications, sometimes I don't get notifications. Generally, I won't get a few notifications every day. Sometimes I'll get some notifications. It's kind of hit or miss with the notifications, to be honest. Um, so, unfortunately, as a general review, I would not recommend this device to anybody. With the amount of issues that I have with it, I would just not recommend it, unfortunately. The only pro I can give it, like I said, was when it works, it does a great job. It really does. It does a test, it gives me a result. It's automatic. I don't have to worry about it. But unfortunately, I have a number of issues that outweigh you know, the pros of the unit. The needle bending, which I mentioned earlier, can be easily fixed, but not something that they mention to you to make sure that all the vials are straight. I've heard of people having multiple issues with the test chamber with the little stir that goes inside it jumping out. I've heard of people having leaks from their units. Again, there are a multitude of people that don't have any of these issues, but I think the cloud issue is pretty common. It going offline is pretty common. Um, the accuracy, like I said, it's an accurate device if the test itself is accurate. So if you're assuming that the Reef Bot is going to be accurate, you have to understand that the Reef Bot itself is not accurate. It's based off of the test if it's going to be accurate. Um, their support is, I would say, very good. Generally, they respond. In the beginning, when I first got it, I wouldn't get a response for days. They've gotten very good at their support. In the beginning, like I said, it used to be very slow. It's much faster now. So they are slowly improving the device, but I don't think it's quite ready to be um, sold. I think there's a lot of R&D that needs to be done to the software. Unfortunately, I can't recommend it at this time. Maybe in the future I can recommend it. Um, Another thing that I do want to mention is if you go to a company such as Saltwater Aquarium and look at the reviews, they have 16 reviews, 4 stars. If you go to some of the reviews, you will see that basically what I said is what happens. Not accurate, I don't know. The randomly going offline is a very common issue, and you will see that people say this in some reviews. Another thing about saltwateraquarium.com is, unfortunately, I have noticed that some of their reviews get deleted for the Reef Bot. There used to be a lot more reviews on here that said a lot more things about their device. This is my review right here, by the way. And unfortunately, they have deleted some of their reviews that have been on here. I did forget to mention the SD card. So I've had to reformat my SD card 3 times. When the SD card fails, the entire unit stops working. I find that to be very aggravating, but it's quite easy to fix. So again, overall, I can't recommend the device. I just want to mention, like I said, with the saltwater aquarium reviews, do your homework, really know what you're getting into. If the device was $300 or $400, possibly, I would not have as much of a, gripe over a lot of the issues that I've had with it. But for $900, and most of it being 3D printed product inside it, I find that to be a little expensive for what the device does. When you could buy a Trident for $600 and have the quality of the Trident, which again, I've had many people have problems with the Trident also, but not to the magnitude that I've had people talk to me regarding the Reef Bot. So I've been waiting quite a long time to do this review. I wanted to really give it a run for its money and test it with multiple things. And like I said, that's my review of the Reef Bot. I again hope you enjoyed watching the video. I hope it gave you an insight before buying and also an insight if you have one. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. If you own a Reef Bot and you have had really good success with it, please leave a comment below and tell me what you're doing. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. But if you are looking to buy one, I would recommend highly that you do a lot of research and make sure that you know what you're getting into. So thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day, and look forward to seeing you at the live streams.